digestible. I'm talking about liquid. Rich enough to have your own jet. Rich enough not to waste time. Well, in my book, you either do it right or you get eliminated. They're analysts. They don't know preferred stock from livestock, all right? The new law of evolution in corporate America seems to be survival of the unfit.
Good evening, stock traders, and welcome to Stock Traders Talk Radio here on a beautiful Tuesday night, March the 27th, 2012. I am your host, STT. Joining me on tonight's program, I have QT Cal.
Hello, STT.
Hello, QT. How's everything?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Excellent.
Also joining us on the program tonight, I have Stock Sumo.
Hey, good evening, gang.
How are you tonight, Sumo?
Oh, I'm doing great, thank you.
That's good to hear. Also on the program with us tonight is Mr. Cop.
Hey, STT, QT, Sumo, how are you?
Fantastic, sir. How about yourself?
Excellent. Absolutely excellent.
That's good to hear. Also on the program tonight with us is Sifakia.
Aloha, STT.
How are you, sir?
Gang.
How are you?
I'm good.
That's good to hear. Your back's getting better?
Slowly but surely.
That's always a good thing. All right, tonight we have yet another exclusive CEO interview for our listeners. Doing tonight's interview is Mr. Kopp. Mr. Kopp, take it away, sir.
Thanks, STT. We're here with Mr. Cameron Reynolds, the president and CEO of Revolutionize, stock ticker VNRX. Welcome to Stock Traders Talk Radio, Mr. Reynolds.
Good. Thanks. Nice to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. How about if we start off with what your company does?
Yes, thank you. We are developing a cancer diagnostic based on a blood test which detects the level of nucleosomes in a patient's blood.
Now, as far as the, I was reading a couple things about Volition, and Volition's focus is to bring to market a range of cancer detection blood tests, and there's an urgent and unmet need in the cancer diagnostic market for large-scale and low-cost screening tests. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think anyone familiar with cancer currently understands that if a cancer is detected early, then usually the outcomes are quite good. If you can be detected early and be treated, there are a lot of treatments which are very, very good very early. Where things tend to not go as well are when cancers are detected quite late. Now, currently there aren't very many screening devices, and I don't think very many that work well at all, which are done as a screening test. Usually it's done when you have symptoms. For example, if you have lung cancer, when you are coughing up blood or have other symptoms, which normally is a time when it's getting quite late in the cancer cycle. So what's very, very important is to detect early, and then treatment can be quite effective. And a lot of cancers, such as pancreatic, are often or very rarely detected early and often detected late. So a great amount of good can be done by having a diagnostic which can detect early. Now, of course, the ultimate prize in medicine would be a cure for cancer. But cancer is a very multi-headed, very difficult condition, disease to treat or to cure. So in the short term or medium term, the best way to deal with cancer would be a very good diagnostic to tell someone in a reasonable amount of time, in a manner which is not expensive or invasive, that they have cancer. There are lots of diagnostics out there for cancer, but very few of them are good for screening, as we discussed. For example, the PSA for prostate is available, but is not as accurate as it really as it could be to be a very effective screening device. So, yeah, that's why Evolution has focused on this, and if we're successful, it'll be tremendously useful for humanity in general. as a way of detecting cancers and detecting them early.
Now, I understand you have extensive experience in the biotechnology companies and a lot of entrepreneur type things. Can you describe to our audience your experience and your background?
Yes, I'm in my early 40s. I've been involved in startup companies since my early 20s. It's actually longer than I care to remember, but I started my career in 2 biotechnology companies, both of which were in the United States, actually in Hawaii, same as your president. And both of those were in the genetically modified. The first one was a genetically modified coffee, and the one I spent most of my time was the mouse cloning from the University of Hawaii. We commercialized research into the cloning of the mouse, and we did a trade sale 4 years after we were created to a European company. Since then, I did my master's of business and have been involved in a range of mining startups. All of the complete list is on our webpage and in our filings. But I think in these businesses, a lot of years in the trenches, so to speak, dealing with small companies and growing companies, and all the issues which are developed from them are really, really key. I think as a management team, we need to be very business focused and very product focused, but also have the best possible scientists that we can on our team, as well as the best science advisory board and the groups we have. So as a management team, we've brought together a very diverse range of people from the very corporate and entrepreneurial side, from the accounting side, but also we have over a dozen PhDs on the team now who have a world-class knowledge in this area. So I think the key to success in a company is having the right mix of all of those people, and I think as CEO I bring a tremendous amount of business experience, as does the board, and we have a tremendous scientific team on with the group as well.
Sure. Understand. It's always nice to have a whole lot of PhDs around you, that's for sure.
Yes, it's nice not to have a dozen people in the room who are smarter than you. It's very comforting, especially on the scientific side. I couldn't be happier with the team we have. I'm very happy with all of our members of the team, and I think we've put together a really world-class group of people, which will give the very best shot we can at commercializing this very exciting technology.
Now, where is Volition? I mean, where are you located as far as in your as permanently located or corporate structure? Because I understand there's a couple different countries involved here.
Yeah, and we are. The world is getting much smaller and smaller and much more broad. We were very strategic in where we set up our operations. The actual core research was done in Europe in a number of different locations, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But and we set up a company in Belgium for several reasons. It's a very nice place to be. It has a very good base of scientific team members who've been preparing our tests. Also, the government gives very attractive grants for companies which are prepared to move there and develop their products there. In January of last year, we got allocated a very, very considerable and very generous grant from the Walloon region governments in Belgium. So that's where our facilities are. Our corporate headquarters for Asia are in Singapore. Asia, as everyone I'm sure is aware, is a very, very large growing market, and where a majority of the people on the planet now live, and it's a very exciting place to be. It's also a very good place for production, and also a very good place, very, very tax-efficient place to be in the world, which is also very important for a company which is a multinational. And now, as we discussed earlier, we are in the United States as well, as for several very good reasons. The United States is still the world's biggest healthcare market, a very, very important market to be in. Also, from an investor point of view and a corporate point of view, we have always found the best investors and the most entrepreneurial investors who can understand a story like Volition's are in the United States. So we've given ourselves a very good worldwide focus, because if we can get this to work the way we certainly hope and feel it will work, we're going to need to be a worldwide company very quickly. So we've given ourselves a good shot of that as we possibly can right out of the gate.
Understand. How about if we go into what your strategic directions are, your business plan, if you will?
Yes. Given the potential universal nature of the tests, looking at different diseases as well as a lot, if not most, of cancers, we've really targeted this year to be a year of clinical trials and data collection. We've chosen the 3 cancers to start with, which we've done the pilot tests on, being colorectal, lung, and pancreatic, due to the ones they seem to be the most promising. So we spent last year forming the company in structure around the world and getting the tests to work to detect nucleosomes in blood, which we'll discuss in technology. Now we're beginning kit production and also large-scale clinical trials. We announced a month ago we had signed with a very large blood bank called Abcodia, which have 5 million biobank, which have 5 million patient samples, and now we're in the process of sourcing very large prospective clinical trials with thousands and thousands of patients. So the aim for this year is to get the proof of concept, the early promising results we have from a smaller number of samples, repeated over larger and larger and larger samples. And if those were successful, we will have a CE mark application in this year, which, if that was successful, would allow us to sell these products clinically in Europe, as well as a large part of what we need to do for FDA approval. FDA approval requires more work than the European CE mark and a large amount of prospective studies, but we're beginning those prospective studies in the coming months, in the next couple of months. Of course, it all depends on how they go in the process of the clinical trials. But if all went moderately well or quite well, we would have a CE application mark in for clinical use in Europe in one or more of the cancers I mentioned. And also, we aim to test the tests in the top 20 cancers, so we have a good idea as to how they work on a range of different cancers, as well as a large number of controls, which were mixed between quote-unquote healthy people and other competing conditions. Obviously, it's not just good enough to have healthy versus cancer. There's a lot of other people with other conditions who are quite sick, so we need to make sure that the tests can distinguish between cancer patients as well as other people with competing conditions, which I can get to in the technology area later. But we'll need to test hundreds and thousands of patients, hundreds then thousands of patients, age-matched, sex-matched. We're also looking at doing them in different parts of the world to make sure there were no differences as to race or anything else. And there are slight differences in different regions of the world with what cancers are most prevalent. So we're attempting to do as a broad number of clinical trials as we can in this coming year. So we will have kits ready. We will be testing them on large numbers. And if it went reasonably well, as I said, we'd have an application to sell in Europe and be a long way down the road to having FDA, the work done for FDA application.
No, I find it interesting when you're talking about the larger numbers. I mean, from what I understand, I mean, the current cancer diagnostic tests are right now inadequate. I mean, they're too expensive. Most of them are inaccurate, and they're unsustainable to use on mass screening tests. Is that what you're changing?
Yes, indeed. A lot of very good people have worked on cancer diagnostics, and it's certainly not a slight on them. But I think anyone who's really, I mean, usually people often have an opinion that they've had a cancer test, but very few people actually have unless they've had symptoms or one of the basic screening devices, when you're 50 or 60. For example, the mammogram or the PSA for prostate. So very few people, and as you said, they're not that sensitive or specific as they need to be. There really isn't there's certainly no general screening device for cancer in general, and specific cancers. For example, the most common way now is through a biopsy, but you're not going to biopsy every one of your organs to see if you have cancer. A, it would be very expensive, B, very painful, and you have to know where the cancer is. So, and then screening devices, a scan for lung cancer, it's very expensive. It's very, and they can, obviously be unhealthy for you as well, some of the scans. So there's absolutely no doubt there's a very large need in the community for a test which is actually a very good screening test, and it's not out there. So that's what we're working hard to see if this technology will be useful for that. But also, it's a big step to go from where we are to screening. So there's a lot of steps in between for individual cancers and other ways the blood test can be used. But I think it's very fair to say a simple, quick, cheap blood test is the holy grail of cancer, of medicine in a lot of ways now, apart from curing cancer, which would be very nice, but unfortunately unlikely. So that's why we're very keen to give this technology every opportunity through the clinical trials to see if we can get it to work as a large-scale device. And it's looking very good from where we are, but we want to be very responsible and have a large-scale clinical trials because cancer is a very, very emotive issue for a lot of people. I don't think there's anyone in the planet who hasn't been touched, either themselves or a family member or a friend. So it's something which we want to do properly and really get it right, because it would be tremendously valuable to a lot of people. And people often ask, what's your addressable market? We think if it can be a test which we can get to be where we want it to be, I don't see why anyone on the planet wouldn't want to know their nucleosome level. Well, probably not when they're 20 years old, but certainly by the time they get into their 40s and 50s, it would be a very good indication. So we're working very hard to do the responsible thing and trial on a very large scale in a very scientific way to see exactly how it works over a large population, given our very exciting early trials.
I understand completely. Now, I don't have a medical degree or a medical background. However, I've heard you mention nucleosomes a couple of times. Can you go into what that is, how it works in the blood, and how the technology applies to it? Yes, absolutely. And that's really the core of all of this and what we're so excited about. Basically, the basic technology comes down to some fundamental principles. Those are that when cells die, and cells die in your body all the time, it's very natural for your body to reprocess all the things, and the cells are being born and dying. At any time in your body, there's innumerable cells being born and dying. The body recycles all parts of the cell. And one part, which has really only become known about, and certainly only really understood in the last decade or more, what's called nucleosomes. Now, most people are familiar with the concept of DNA. It's the code of what we are. But the DNA strand itself wraps around nucleosomes in a bead of strings, kind of, I guess, if you look on our website, there's pictures of what it looks like. But basically, the DNA wraps around nucleosomes, and it's a method for information to come in and out of the DNA, which is very, very technical, but we'll leave that for what it is. But what we do know, and has been proven about 10 years ago, is that when a cell is recycled, the body is very good at recycling everything. And one key part that's recycled are nucleosomes. Now, how does that help us with cancer? Cancer is, I think most people will be aware, is characterized by very aggressive cell growth and death. Even a small cancer, which is stable in size, is very active, has a tremendous amount of turnover. If it's the same size, cell death and cell birth are in equilibrium, but there is still a lot of cell death. So what does that mean? It means that the body's natural reprocessing of those nucleosomes, which are broken up, is overwhelmed by a cancer. So if you don't have cancer, you've got a small level of nucleosomes in your body naturally. If you do have cancer, it looks very, very compelling that you have a considerably raised level of nucleosomes in your blood. It's natural, it's not unhealthy, it's not like a circulating tumor cell which can cause secondary cancers. It's just your body, I guess, stockpiling nucleosomes which, it will reprocess. Now, understand. Hey, Mr. Reynolds?
Yep.
Just to give you a heads up, every once in a while you're breaking up a little bit, but you're coming in very clear now. Okay. Wherever you are is a very good signal. So I would stay there.
I'll stay still. So Should I continue then?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So those nucleosomes, it was proven about a decade ago there's a raised level of nucleosomes in your blood. So there have been tests developed in the past or used in the past to measure the nucleosome level in your blood. Now, that's been known for a decade, but it was not used as a diagnostic because there are other things. Anything which includes a lot of cell death will give you a raised level of nucleosomes. Now, what other conditions? None of them are healthy, but things like arthritis or a heart attack, a stroke, a car accident or trauma means a lot of cell death, which means more nucleosomes in your blood. So the tests were not used as a diagnostic because you could have raised levels for other reasons. So what our key technology and the difference is ours does not just look for the number of nucleosomes in your system, which we do, but a secondary test which looks at the different structures of those nucleosomes in your blood. Now, what appears very compelling, and from our testing are that, and from a lot of literature which has been written on nucleosomes in tissue culture, which is the biopsies from other cancer patients, that these structures of nucleosomes are very, very different and or have noticeable differences from structures from other conditions. So that what we're looking for is not just that you have a raised level of nucleosomes, but what we're trying to identify are the structures which will tell us that that nucleosome came from a cancer or from another condition. And what the ultimate aim is, which will take more work, is also trying to tell exactly what type of cancer from the type of nucleosome. It appears that, and we've developed several tests now under our NuQ brand, nucleosome quantitation, our nucleosome trademark, is a test which measure the total level of nucleosomes and tests which just target certain types of nucleosomes, so that we can then, from the frontline test and then from secondary tests, which are very quick and easy to do from the same sample of blood, we aim to be able to tell your level of nucleosome, does it come from cancer, and hopefully, based on some more testing of lots of different types of cancer, we would very much like to be able to tell you what type of cancer from those cancers. But and that's the process we're working through now to see if that's possible.
Mr. Reynolds, we're losing you again.
Oh, really? My apologies. I'll try and. Is that any?
Yeah, you're coming in perfectly clear now.
My apologies.
I probably should have told. It's okay. I probably should have told the audience that you're actually in Singapore now, I believe.
Yes.
So we're going around the globe to bring this to you. So please bear with us while we go through there. The last maybe 30 seconds was kind of garbled, and if you could go from the new QT TM and the as far as the product piece that you were talking about.
Yes. So the levels of tests which we're developing, the first frontline test will, from a very small amount of blood, tell you, do you have a raised level of nucleosomes in your blood? The second level of tests will aim to show us if those nucleosomes came from cancer. And then the third level of tests, which we're developing and have not been developed yet, but we're hopeful we can develop over the coming year or two, would be to aim to tell you what type of cancer those nucleosomes came from, which would be extremely useful and valuable, as we discussed earlier. So it seems very compelling that cancer patients have a very high level of nucleosomes in their blood compared to healthy patients. There are other conditions which can give you that raised level. So what we're focusing on very much now are the structural differences between the nucleosomes to aim to tell us if they came from cancer and what type of cancer. And that's what we're developing now, and we'll know much more after these clinical trials and the trials to come.
Now, regarding the product development, I understand you'll have 4 stages, the simple 96-well ELISA for research and the first clinical sales. Then you're moving on to large-scale hospital laboratory equipment, then smaller point-of-care tests for use on oncologist offices, as well as finally, small disposable tests for use by MD or home use. Is that still the plan, and can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, as we talked about, we're in the clinical trial stage now, but if that is successful, as of course we're hopeful of, the very good thing with our technology, the technology's potential, is what we're looking for is extremely cutting edge and new, but the method of detection is a very old platform. It's called ELISA. Now, most people would have come across it without knowing it from simple pregnancy tests and other things. It's basically a double antibody detection system, which is very cheap and very familiar to anyone in a pathology lab anywhere in the world. So the ELISA format is very adaptable and can be rolled out if it's clinically successful in these trials on a number of different platforms. The one we start with is a very simple plastic plate with the tests, 96 tests in each plate, which is a very good way to start and a very familiar format to laboratories. Obviously, if it becomes very successful, laboratories don't want to keep buying plates all the time when they're doing thousands of tests a day. So we would aim to put it on one of the larger machines. A lot of the big companies produce them, which simplistically automate the process from these small plastic manual plates on a large scale. A large hospital would possibly have one, or most hospitals in the world which do these would have one, and they can do thousands and thousands of tests a day. So for example, for the whole of Los Angeles, you probably have 3 or 4 of these machines which could cover the whole city. If you want to have a format, which is the next format, if you want to be able to prick your finger in the doctor's office, the next level of the ELISA format is a small machine which sits in the nurse's room or in the doctor's office, which could tell you the level of nucleosomes, hopefully the type of nucleosomes from a small machine, which is on the web page. The final level, which would be developed if we're successful in all the others, is a single-shot use system. It would look very similar to a pregnancy test or one of the other tests which people are very familiar with. The benefit of that is that you wouldn't have to go to the doctor or to use a pathology lab. You could get it done either in the doctor's office. Now, theoretically, it could also be done at home, but obviously you need to consider very carefully the regulatory and ethical issues of people finding out they've got a potentially deadly disease themselves in their own home. We would see that format first being used in patients, for example, in relapse. There's something like 18 million Americans currently who have had cancer and are in relapse. So we would see that being more used on them first. So rather than going to the doctor every few months, you could test your nucleosome level at home to see if it's if it's rising, which would not be a very good sign for relapse. So as I discussed before, each different stage for the ELISA is used for different things and makes it an easier format to use. But you start with the most easy-to-use format for laboratories, which is the 96 well-plate ELISA. So, and that's one of the many reasons we're very excited about this, because it's such a simple format. A lot of diagnostics now are extremely complicated and expensive and need a lot of training. The ELISA format for detection of nucleosomes could not really be simpler for what we're after, which makes the tests very cheap, and it makes the process for testing them very cheap. So what we're doing now is doing the clinical trials to make sure of the sensitivity and specificity of the tests, to make sure we can use them clinically.
Now, I kind of want to touch on the topic of cancer, and you know, you've hit a couple of key points where you know, everybody knows somebody that's affected by it. So I just want to give a couple quick stats on this. You know, cancer accounts for 13% of annual global deaths. There's currently 13 million survivors in the USA alone, expected to be 18.1 million by 2020. The cost to the U.S. alone is $158 billion by the time 2020. Patient outcomes are better if cancer is detected early, as you said. The current cancer market has no screening for cancer in general. For most specific cancer, there's no test suitable for general screening. Most are too expensive, or, you know, as we said, too invasive, or too many false negative positives. The you know, where I kind of want to trigger on a little bit is the fact that you know, I would assume that from a revenue standpoint, are going to be derived from direct sales, product sales partners, and distribution agreements. How, as far as from the, to go from the CE mark or the FDA approval, are you going to be selling to research markets? Is that the plan of how that works during this process?
Yes, absolutely. The ability to detect nucleosomes in bodily fluid or blood, which is where we're mostly focused, is extremely useful for a lot of other research apart from just our diagnostic tests. Nucleosomes are a marker for a lot of different things, and they've become a very exciting field for researchers in a wide range of fields. So the good news from the revenue point of view is the same format for clinical use, which will tell you and I if we have cancer, are also very useful in the research market. Now, the research market, perhaps some of your listeners aren't aware, but is not regulated. I think the government quite rightly assumes a PhD in an area will know if it's useful for them without the government telling them what it is. So researchers, buy or sell them on their own merit because they're obviously very well versed in the uses of the technology. So the kits, exactly the same format and exactly the same kits, are very useful in the research market. Now, it will not cost us very much to make these tests. It'll certainly be under $100 in the $50 to $100 range, depending on the test. And equivalent epigenetic tests for an ELISA plate for different issues we sell in the region of $500 to $1,000 per plate. So the margin is excellent. It's very difficult to say the exact size of the research market. It certainly won't make us a large international company, but it certainly would help us in any revenue. Certainly for a small company is very, very useful. So we'll be selling those kits to researchers in the short term. Also, that helps you to get a good base of people using your kits, and if they were to make technology based on our kits, then obviously they'd have to get a license from us. So it's potentially a good source of early revenue, and it's also potentially a good source of early licensing revenue while we're in the process of getting clinical acceptance, which means being able to use on patients. Now, the European CE mark, which is a very large healthcare market, hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, equivalent in population to the United States, is a process which is slightly easier than the FDA. You simplistically have to just show that it does what it says it does, which is detect nucleosomes in the blood. So if these clinical trials go well over the next 6 months, we would certainly hope to have an application in to be able to use it in Europe later this year. Now, having a CE mark and clinicians accepting it are two different things, which is why we're doing prospective trials so that clinicians, I think, cancer doctors are very conservative for very good reasons. They don't like transferring into a brand new test without a lot of information because obviously it's real lives in real conditions and they're not risk takers, which is exactly the way they should be. But the very good news for us on the clinical trial side, most people think of small startups or drug trials as taking 10 years, costing $50 million or hundreds of millions of dollars, which is correct. But for an in vitro, which means out-of-the-body test, for diagnostic, it's much quicker and cheaper because the people we do the clinical trials on, we're not going to hurt from the clinical trial. If I was to bring in some of the members of the audience into a clinical trial for a new drug, it's extremely slow and a laborious process because we could hurt those people with the drug. Whereas when we take a small amount of blood from you to test it, it can be done. We can have the test give us the answer that day, and also we're not going to hurt the person. So clinical trials still take 6 months or a year or more for the initial stage, but it's not something which is anywhere near as complicated or expensive as for a drug trial, which, as everyone knows who's invested in these companies, can be exceptionally expensive and time-consuming.
Sure. Now, I understand that, beyond what you've talked about up to now, the hypergenomics piece, I mean, you're going down that path as well, correct?
Yes, we've got to. Given this is such an exciting new area of science, a lot of opportunities have come across our path. One of which is hypergenomics, which was developed by an extremely good team from Imperial College in London, which is incredibly well respected institution. We have pushed them a little on the back burner because cancer and the blood tests are such an amazing opportunity, and we're a small company. We're very focused on getting these products to market and getting some early revenue and a proof that they work in a clinical trial of a large scale. But so I won't discuss it at length too much because it will just add to the level of scientific complexity for everybody. But it's a much more complicated technology. We're very excited about it, but one thing is, as a business and as a management group, we've decided to. A lot of companies fail because they grab too many things and don't deliver on anything. We've kept it going in the background, and we're hopeful that it'll become very useful in the next year or two for very specific cancer detection. But it's quite a complicated technology to describe, and it's not our focus at the moment. We're also looking at some other things like using nucleosomes for endometriosis, which is a very destructive condition which affects a large amount of women in the world. But we're very mindful of our resources, we're very mindful of how exciting the technology potential is for nucleosomes. So anyone who's of a scientific bent who wants to have a look at it on the website or somewhere else, please have a look. But we are very hopeful and very excited about the potential, but we're very focused as a business and as a team to really deliver. If we can deliver on any part of nucleosomes as a blood test for cancer, we'll be a tremendously helpful organization for humanity and for our shareholders. So in the short term, we're focused like a laser beam on those tests. But I'd be happy to share with anyone on a separate conversation. Hypergenomics, it's tremendously exciting, and we do have a pipeline of other technologies which have come our way given our success in delivering on these technologies. But it's something which I think is probably best. That would probably be another whole hour phone call. Interview. But it's exciting, and as an organisation, we're very mindful. I think how it does fit in. We've put together a very exciting science advisory board of the best people we can find in the business. As someone with a MBA background myself, I'm always looking for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The old analysis, and in the process of looking through all the different options we have and opportunities and threats, a lot of technologies come up because there's a lot of new technology in this space. It's a very exciting field. So we are in contact with a lot of researchers and a lot of other people who are looking for a pipeline to develop their technologies commercially. In an exciting new field, there's often a lot more technologies than there are people who are expert at commercializing them. So
I'm losing you again, Mr. Reynolds.
Oh, sorry. Is that I'm standing still? Is that I haven't moved? Is that better now? Should I call from my cell phone?
It's getting better.
Oh, sorry.
What's that?
I'm sitting in the same place. So it just must be the international line.
How about if we do this? Let's go ahead and reset the connection. We'll go to a commercial break, and then we'll have you call back in, and we'll go from there. Does that work for you?
Okay, thank you. Yes.
All righty.
Thanks.
All righty. A little break in the interview here as we wait for him to call back in. Commercials right here. We'll be right back here at Stock Traders Talk Radio.
PennyChatterStocks.com, where our network becomes your game. There is no need for 6 or 7 sites to track your penny stock buds. We've got chat, forums, blogs. You can integrate your Twitter, Facebook, Google+, MailChimp emailers all on one site so that your following comes with you. All it comes down to is the network, www.pennychatterstocks.com.
And now, a quick word from thepennybin.com. What does one penny say to the other penny? Let's get together and make some sense. Are you tired of losing your hard-earned pennies? Be sure to visit thepennybin.com and download our iPhone app where delivery of our stock plays right into your iPhone instantly. The time to start making money is now. Please be advised that you may make huge sums of money and that thepennybin.com will not be held liable.
Okay, we're waiting for him to call back in. Is everybody back with me?
Oh, yeah, we're back with you. That's one of the challenges of going around the globe with communications. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
This is some fascinating stuff, though. I mean, he's talking about the Holy Grail here. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you really have done your homework on cancer. I tell you what, some of the stuff that you're hip to is above my head.
I have read on this one for weeks, absolutely weeks. And not, he said a key fact about the fact that everyone's touched by somebody with cancer as well as I am. So there's we've had some deaths in our family long before their time. So of course, you kind of get a little bit of information and knowledge over time based off of that type of stuff.
Absolutely, and anytime you could aid in the early detection process.
Okay, we have him back.
All right.
I'm using my cell phone.
Okay, we got you.
Oh, perfectly clear there, Mr. Reynolds.
Oh, I should have used this to start with. The landline you think would be better, wouldn't you? But there you go.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, you wouldn't know. I guess the old copper wires don't work as well.
Understand. How about if we go into talking about the different pieces when it comes to the patents and what you plan to do during the regulatory part?
Yes. Which shall I start with, the patents or the regulatory?
Yeah, let's probably start with the patents, because I think that's key to everything you're doing. I mean, we were kind of talking. We were kind of talking while you weren't here.
We've got a range of patents
Go ahead.
now. We've got a range of patents and applications. They pertain to using nucleosomes as a diagnostic in bodily fluids and detecting the different structures of nucleosomes in there. The one we have granted in Europe was based on the different structural modifications of nucleosomes in the blood, and we have applications on every other type of structural difference, which there are, or we can certainly, that are known to be. So that we believe we have a very strong package of IP which will protect the research that we've done and allow us to provide a product which is proprietary and very, very novel around the world. And it pertains to all diseases and all bodily fluids. We've tried to make it as broad as possible. Patents are always a complicated issue, but we have a wide range of we have one approved in a wide range of applications, and we're confident that they will give us good coverage. I guess that's all comes out in the future as to how it works, but we're very happy with what we have, and we're discovering new things all the time, and we're adding to our IP portfolio all the time. As far as
regarding,
is that,
go ahead.
Sorry? Yep.
I understand the patent piece, and I'm sure that's a whole other thing where you can go deep into. At the end of the day, especially from your perspective, is one, having them, and two, being protected. Because you're talking about the Holy Grail here, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, we're very excited, and we're in the process. We're trying to do the very responsible thing and do large clinical trials before we get too excited and promotional, but we're very excited with what we have. And if we can prove what we have done in the pilot studies over a large number of patients, which we'll have in the process right now, and we will hopefully be well and truly down that track this year, it is absolutely a fantastic opportunity for detecting cancer, and we're very excited. And of course, IP is a very important part of that, to make sure that we can protect the investment and the shareholders from that. And that's something which we take very seriously, and we've taken a lot of care and effort to give ourselves a broader reach as we can to make sure that we have the protection which can really add to shareholder value.
Now, one thing I want to go into is what you're going to do from a regulatory standard piece, your strategy there. And, for our listeners, to understand when you're dealing on a global market, for Europe, you get the CE mark. For the United States, you get the FDA approval. So can you elaborate on your strategy to be able to go meet those stages, those phases of your plan?
Yes, we've looked at this very carefully, of course, because this is key to using it. There's the unregulated, this was earlier, so maybe if I wasn't clear, it wasn't clear, but there is a market which is unregulated to researchers who it is very useful to detect the nucleosome level in blood by a whole lot of other research. We want to sell kits to the research market starting this next quarter. But the market for that is not huge, but it's nice early revenue for a company such as ourselves. Then to be able to use it on patients in a clinical sense, you need to get, as you said, in Europe and in the US, it's the FDA approval, and in Europe it's called the CE mark. Now, for a couple of reasons, the CE mark is quicker and cheaper to do. It's a slightly lighter touch regulatory system in Europe than it is in the United States, and Europe is a very large market, actually larger in population now than the United States because there's so many countries in there. So we're in the process now of doing the trials which would, if they were successful, continue to be successful, would allow us to apply for a CE mark application in Europe this year. And we will be well underway with the FDA process from these prospective trials, which we're beginning now in the next month. So the aim of the rollout of the product is to sell to researchers to get a very good early revenue on a very good margin while we're in the process of getting clinical acceptance and clinical approval through the CE mark and the FDA approval, as well as there's a few other ones, other markets which are important, but the two big ones are Europe and the United States because they're very, very large, homogeneous healthcare markets. So our IP covers us in the areas we need to be in. We have a very set plan for clinical acceptance as well as the FDA and CE mark approval. And the first step in all that is to have large clinical trials of the products, which we discussed before, are age-matched and sex-matched and all the other competing conditions, sure, which we're in the process of going through. And as I discussed earlier, which hopefully came through, given the fact that it's out-of-the-body tests, which in scientific speak is in vitro, the clinical trials do not take anywhere near as long as they would for a drug trial due to the fact that we can't very easily harm the patient. In a drug trial, a lot of the effort goes into making sure those in the clinical trial are not hurt by the clinical trial. But as we're taking a very small amount of blood out of someone, it's very unlikely we'll hurt the people who are in our clinical trial. And also, the other good thing with blood is there is the prospect of retrospective trials, meaning banks of blood or samples taken from healthy people and cancer people, people with cancer over the last several years, can also be very useful in helping you if it works or not. So we're going to be using the full armory of prospective and retrospective trials. We aim to have about 8 or 10 centers collecting for us from big teaching hospitals around the world, including the United States, including Europe, and including Asia. And we'll begin announcing them over the coming months, and they will do large-scale collections for us prospectively in a very measured and scientific way to give us the proof that is needed for the CE mark and FDA approval.
I appreciate you explaining that again. I knew that was such an important point. And here in the U.S., everything's FDA, and believe it or not, a lot of people have never even heard of CE mark unless they're big investors in the bio world and drugs and companies like that. So I wanted to elaborate that on again because potentially based off the world market and as big as the area that you're talking about, understanding how each one of those revenue streams are going to be created are a very big deal. What I'd like to shift to now is kind of talking about any strategic alliances or partners you have. And, could you elaborate if you have any of those and how they're playing into what you're doing?
Yeah, obviously for a company like ourselves, we need very big strategic partners so far as testing the products. So we've announced the first big one with a company called Abcodia, which was a spin-off of the University College London, which has 5 million patient samples of blood, which would tell us a very large amount of information of all the different types of people for example, smokers, non-smokers, other conditions. We're developing now, and we will announce over the coming months, relationships with big university teaching hospitals around the world who can provide us with large numbers of samples. And obviously, moving forward, our company probably, if the clinical trials go well, this will quickly become much bigger than we can handle product-wise and worldwide reach-wise. So we're in the process of identifying the large players in the field. We're not looking to sell out early. We're looking to find cooperative marketing partners for us to move forward. There is obviously some very strong interest from big companies in working with companies which have exciting new technologies. And given successful clinical trials which we're undertaking now, I think there's a very strong interest from the major players in the field to work with a company such as ourselves to really develop the product in a method which is so we could roll out much, much quicker worldwide and in many markets at the same time.
The interesting point that you just made there, because I was actually going to go there next. I mean, if through the clinical trials that you solve what everybody's been trying to solve with the test by being able to detect cancer early enough to where the big drug companies can basically make their drugs to battle whatever cancer it is prior to, in the early stages, because that's the chance of living longer the earlier you detect, as you said earlier, is what it's all about. You're going to have every big company that you can imagine wanting your product. So, it's interesting that you sat there and you said that the buyout option or somebody taking you over is clearly you're not in this just for the quick buck. I mean, there's a lot more going on here. Am I accurate on how I'm describing that?
Absolutely. Well, and if the clinical trials are successful, I think we can add a lot of value to the product. The big companies tend to be better at rolling it out as a marketing organization worldwide. I think we've proved ourselves, and especially if these trials go very well, very good at developing new ELISAs for different structures of nucleosomes. And I think we could add a lot of value to a joint relationship with one of the big players. It's something which is tremendously exciting for everybody, for patients, for the company, for other companies, the bigger companies. I see our role as being need to be very responsible in our clinical trials, be very responsible in our communication with the public and shareholders as to the opportunities, but also the work that needs to be done to get there. But it's something, as you said, if we do have successful clinical trials, it's a tremendously exciting opportunity to be able to detect cancer from a blood test. And the tests so far have been excellent. We've done on small samples, but you need these larger samples to become a clinical product. But if that is successful, which certainly is what we are very hopeful of, we would have a lot of very large organizations extremely keen to work with us because the ability to detect cancer from a very simple blood test would really revolutionize cancer diagnostics, which would do an awful lot of good for an awful lot of people around the world, which translates into tremendous opportunity commercially, obviously. And it's something we're very excited about and something which we want to be a part of moving forward. We've developed a very strong scientific team which develops these products, and we certainly want to be part of the future of all that rather than just doing a quick flip to one of the large companies. And I think given the tremendous opportunity, I think that also equates to the best value for shareholders, having an alliance with a major partner who can really help us develop it worldwide, but keep on developing the products as we do, I think, very well ourselves, to really have the best possible outcome for shareholders and for the general public.
Now, based on the fact that especially in the scientific community as well as in the the medical communities, if you will, a lot of the things that you see that happen over research seminars, conferences, and those type of things. Do you see yourselves playing a big role in those over the course of the next few years?
Yeah, I think we're attempting to be very, very precise and those are the procedures. But the area of science we're in, anyone out there who has a very strong scientific background could easily see that nucleosomes are becoming a very, very hot area of research. The team we have and our advisory board and the members, we've licensed in a lot of technologies, are incredibly smart people who have been working on this for a long period of time, who are very passionate about, it might sound funny to non-scientific people, but are very passionate about nucleosomes, and they're an incredibly important part in the good things with the body as well as bad things like cancer, but the regulation of epigenetics and the science of the DNA and the whole area we're in. If this proves to be even slightly successful in what we're aiming to be, it'll take a lot of activity to really get it to a lot of different areas, and I think will become a very big hub for research. And I think nucleosomes are something which a lot more people have become a lot more familiar with in the scientific community and in the general community, because they appear to be extremely important in the makeup of ourselves and the very basis of what makes us human beings and science. So we're very hopeful that, given it as a diagnostic, it's going to be very useful. But through hypergenomics and through other areas, it could be the foundation of a lot of other very exciting areas of research. And our scientific team are very keen to be part of that and be really on the cutting edge of something which looks to be extremely useful to science and to mankind in general. And as a business, we're trying to equate that into value for shareholders as well, so that the people who've invested the money and made this possible can also make share in the upside of this exceptionally interesting and energizing area of science.
Now, I kind of want to go into your milestones and over the course of the next year per se. What do you see being the catalysts or the major events that you anticipate over the next year that are the big things that investors should be interested in?
Well, as we said, we've got very exciting trials from what we've done internally. The next milestone is to get the same results externally from several groups we're working with, so that we can publish what would be a very exciting, very groundbreaking paper, and then really work through the process. As a business, we're now negotiating with larger and larger groups to give us for the clinical trials in different organizations. We'll be announcing that over the summer and beginning very shortly with some of the trials. That would allow us to test patients thousands and thousands prospectively, as well as a large number retrospectively. The first big one, as I said, we announced last month, which is a very exciting joint collaboration with Abcodia, who have 5 million samples. We certainly aim to have thousands and thousands of prospective samples collected over the next year. So, as I think I discussed briefly before, we also aim to have it tested in the top 20 cancers, with at least 30 to 100 patients in each of those, so that we'll know from that how universal it is amongst different cancers and if it works in the major cancers, and ultimately to tell the different structures from each cancer, which telling the nucleosome structures from other conditions from cancer appears to be easier than telling them from each individual cancer. So that's something which we're in the process of trying to develop as quickly as we can. So if it all went very well, we would have a very large amount of data, which we're very hopeful will be positive by the end of the year. Also, for clinical acceptance or clinical use in Europe, we would certainly hope to have an application in, and once an application's in, if it's obviously got everything it needs, it doesn't take very long in Europe to get that approved. So we could start selling clinically the product for clinical use in Europe next year. The United States does take longer, obviously, because of the FDA process is a longer one. But we would have enough for the clinical trials over the next year or two to do an application in the United States as well. So, and from there, obviously, an ability to detect cancer from a very simple blood test is exceptionally compelling and useful if the clinical trials continue to go well. So we would be And by that stage, we would very much want to have had a marketing arrangement with one of the big players. I won't mention names because we are in process of working through all that ourselves and who we're working with, but there are some very big players out there who are very interested in this, and especially on the next level of clinical acceptance and trials. So we could be in a very good position reasonably quickly if, and we're trying to just go through a very methodical process, which is a quick process given the fact that it's in blood and it's something which can be done in 6 to 12 months over thousands of patients rather than years and years, which people assume from drug trials. But I think we've set up very well with the facilities we have. We're developing more tests all the time to detect the different structures, and we're really moving forward very strongly with a range of tests. And the next big steps are to get the clinical trials done, which will certainly be well underway, if not some of them finished by the 12 months period you mentioned.
Sure. I think both of us throughout this conversation have mentioned your website, but I don't think we ever said what it was. What is your website?
Oh, VolitionRX.com. Our name, www.VolitionRX.com.
VolitionRX.com.
That's correct.
All right, let me go ahead and spell that just to make sure. VolitionRX.com. Now, we've also referenced that as a great place to get some information on some of the things that we're discussing. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. And, yeah, absolutely. It's a very good site. We've got a video on there now with our Chief Scientific Officer, Jake McAuliffe, who describes it better than I do, I would assume, the process of what we're doing. We've just done a press release today with some infographics as well of what nucleosomes, generally just familiarizing people with nucleosomics and nucleosomes, what they look like, because it's a very new, exciting field, which means most people don't really, quite naturally and quite understandably, don't have a lot of understanding of it. But we have a video on our webpage under the nucleosomics of scientists describing the technology, as well as infographics of what nucleosomes look like and the general concept. And as we discussed, there's information on the different products under our NuQ trademark, nucleosome quantitation, which, we've tried to think of every aspect of the business from the trademarks, from the products to what the products are going to be, once clinical trials are done. Given the very simple format, we can roll them out very quickly. They can be done in a wide number of labs around the world. It's given the very simple nature of the testing itself. As I said, what we're looking for is very, very complicated, but the actual tests themselves could not be easier. So it's something which could be rolled out very quickly and very easily, and that's on the website. We also have a lot of information on our team, and we've got a very strong advisory board. I think perhaps we could talk about that later, but the Science Advisory Board is a management team. And we've also, although we've only been public since October, we've done news releases every time we've hit a milestone. So if investors or anyone interested wants to look through the past year and a half, they can see all the different milestones that we've hit time and time again as we develop as a company. It's very important with our companies to keep moving and keep activity because it's very easy to get bogged down. We have a very hard-working, dedicated team who are really committed to making this work as well as we possibly can. So the webpage, I think, encapsulates a lot of that. It also briefly describes nucleosomics, hypergenomics, as well as the endometriosis uses for our tests, and has a lot of information. So I'd very much recommend if anyone is interested in the company or the story, or just interested in cancer in general and wants to follow and support us in any way they can, trying to get these tests on the market. I think the website's a great place to start.
That's interesting. I actually, during the conversation, kind of just missed the advisory board. But I will tell you this: when I was doing my research for it, it was when I was going through your advisory board. I mean, you have experts in stem cells research, molecular biology, physiology, chemistry, as well as nanotechnology. I was like, wow, okay, this is some amazing stuff that the team that you have all over the place. What role is your advisory board serving you right now?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And that's something which I'd like to highlight to those listening. When we looked at this, we being a business background myself, we sat down and tried to think through all the things which would make us successful and give us the best chance at commercializing this very exciting technology. Obviously, the very important thing is to have the right scientists, to use the mining term, at the coal face and really doing the work, and we're very, very happy with the team we have from that point of view. Also, from the business side, we needed a very corporate board and independent from the management to a large extent so that they could really provide some good oversight. I've seen a lot of boards in small companies where they're all exactly the same as the management, and there's no oversight, there's no review, there's no questioning. So I am on the main board, but we have some very strong independent directors and the chairman who are very, very, very supportive, but also very questioning and want to know exactly why we do things and sometimes out of the day-to-day management. And we secured that very well. If you have a look at the people on the board, they're very strong on giving us that level of oversight. But also, we're also very mindful. The scientists are very good at what they do, but I think it's extremely healthy for everyone to have a level of oversight of people above them who aren't involved day to day, who can ask the big questions. And we put together an advisory board on the science side for that reason, but also to, when you're really hard at work on one thing, you can sometimes miss what's happening around. It's very easy to be, working away and not realize that something else is going on. So we put together the advisory board with a very broad range of people who are very good at what they do and in this field or very similar fields. We're also very keen to add in the original scientists that developed a lot of these technologies. Andreas Lardner, who was from EMBL, which is where we licensed some of the technology from. EMBL is a very large research facility in Europe. It stands for European Molecular Biology Labs, a very well-funded, not a think tank production as well, but a very high-thinking group in Europe. He's on the advisory board. Robert Weinzel, who is one of the chief scientists at Imperial College in London, which is, I guess, the equivalent would be Harvard or one of the top-level universities. He's extremely knowledgeable in this area and helped develop one of these technologies. We also knew personally Dr. Alan Coleman, who's extremely well-respected. He was one of the original inventors of Dolly, which people are probably very familiar with. We got to know him when we were working on the company in Hawaii on the cloning side, but he's also based in Singapore and works, as you said, in other research, very connected to this. And we asked him to be the chairman of our advisory board and come on the main board, which very, very thankfully for us he did. He's been tremendously useful at providing direction and a level of extra knowledge and experience, which is always useful. And Habib joined our group as well as someone with both a PhD but also very strong management experience in the science level. He runs a company called InterZyme in Florida. He's been very helpful with some regulatory issues in the United States as well as just providing a business science background. The advisory board meets every quarter and with our team and management team, and we go through a full day of science, looking for opportunities and threats as well as any weaknesses that we're not doing, and to make sure that we're doing everything properly by the regulatory standards and by the process. There's no point developing products if they're not done properly with the right standards so you can use them clinically, as well as looking for other opportunities. And I mean, what's an opportunity and threat? Sometimes other scientists have come up with technologies which can help us or hurt us, so we try and identify anyone out there and what they're doing. So we've tried to be very systematic about the board, scientists, the advisory board, to give us every chance. And, as we talked about before, this is research and it can not work for reasons which are beyond anyone's control. But we wanted to give ourselves the very best chance of making this work for our shareholders and for any people out there who can be tested in the future and find out in time which can save their life that they have cancer. So we try to be very systematic from all those levels. And I think we put together a very, very, very good team on all levels. And it's something which a company is only really, or a technology is only as good as the people who are there to implement it. So we're very mindful of that. And that's why we put together the team, including the advisory board.
I probably can speak for the audience that the resumes and the team that you've definitely put a lot of A players around you, and you can tell you're extremely serious about where you're going with this. I kind of want to shift gears on you to the shareholder perspective. What do you think makes Volition a good investment for potential investors? I mean, more importantly, if you had a 5-minute elevator speech that would represent the excitement of the future of your company, what would it be?
Yeah, and I think just starting from the outset, I think these things, it's very easy to be promotional and talk arm wave about things happening. We're very careful that we convey to shareholders both a tremendous opportunity. I mean, this has potential better than I've seen in any company I've been involved in or have known have been involved in. I mean, I think anyone with any business sense can see the opportunity, but we mix that with making sure they understand that is developing a product which we're very hopeful of and looks very good, but research is called research for a reason. We're developing products, but things can happen. But from a shareholder point of view, I think what we talked about, we have a very good management group, we have a very good scientific group, we have an extremely good advisory board of people to help us through. We've thought through very strategically where we're going. We're in a very exciting space so far as cancer diagnostics, which if the clinical trials are successful, will become incredibly revolutionary in cancer diagnostics. So from a shareholder point of view, if you do invest in the company, you're getting a share of what would be a tremendous upside. And it's something which has the potential for extremely good growth and reasonably quickly. It's not something which, if it went well, would take 5 or 10 years to develop, like a lot of companies and biomarkers which are out there. If these clinical trials go well this year, there'll be tremendous value added over the next 12 months. And continuing on from that, but it's certainly not something which you need to invest now and wait for 5 or 10 years for any upside. So the investors we have so far, and I guess at this stage investors we're looking for are people who are looking for a very good potential capital growth, but familiar with the risks involved with a company developing an exciting technology and those areas. But it's something which the whole team are very, very passionate about, very excited about, and extremely committed from a personal point of view, wanting to create shareholder value, but also from a very strong point of view of wanting to make a test which could make a tremendous amount of difference for, as I said, I don't think there's anyone I know certainly who hasn't been touched by cancer. And I think the case for a test like this is completely unarguable. What we're tasked with doing over the next 12 months is really clinically developing it and proving that it is valid, and then it'll be a tremendously exciting company and product or products. And the potential range of cancers which it works on is what makes it incredibly exciting. If we get through the next 12 months of testing, it could well work on a very wide range of cancers and other conditions. So we're extremely excited. We're working extremely hard, and we want to try and equate as much value as we possibly can for cancer patients as well as shareholders.
Well, Mr. Reynolds, we've covered a lot of information. Is there anything else you would like to address that I didn't specifically ask you?
Yeah, we discussed IP, we discussed the management, we discussed the technology. No, I think just with leave people with something which I can certainly promise all people we're involved with that we're doing everything we can to do this as quickly as we can, to do this as well as we can. It's something we're very excited about. It's something which has tremendous potential, and we're trying to do it in exactly the right way to be responsible with the technology and the opportunities we have. And if anyone wants to become part of our company, I think we'll do everything we possibly can to give shareholder value. We're very cognizant of the fact that we have an obligation for shareholder value, as well as we're keepers of a technology which we're very hopeful will really help a lot of people in diagnostics. So we'll keep on going on both those tracks and do everything we can to commercialize this and do it properly and do it well and do it as quickly as we can.
Well, Mr. Reynolds, we would like to thank you for taking the time out to speak to our audience, and also would like to extend you an open invitation to join us on the radio show anytime in the future. We're really looking forward to where your company is going to go and solving some of the some of the world's problems, and that's a huge endeavor, and we commend you for that. And it's not an easy undertaking. Many have tried, and clearly you're in a fast lane to potentially doing that. And if you do that and you get to that level, your name's world famous. I mean, that's just going to be the way it's going to be.
I think our scientists will become world renowned. That's for certain. And I think if this goes well, there won't be a single person on the planet who won't want to know their nucleosome level at some stage in their life to see. Well, I guess some people don't want to know if they have a condition, but I think a vast majority of mankind will want to know their nucleosome level to see if they have a condition. If all these trials go well, it's very exciting.
Absolutely.
So it can be that universal.
Well, sir, thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Good night.
Good night. That was Mr. Cameron Reynolds, the president and CEO of VNRX, stock ticker VNRX. Wow, guys, the holy grail, the pursuit of solving, detecting cancer at an early stage to be able to save lives. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I wish him all the luck in achieving that goal.
Yeah, and he kept it simple, which I like.
Yeah. I mean, that's he did, and when you start digging into that, I mean, there's a lot of words that I don't know how to pronounce, and there's you're talking everybody on his team is MBAs, PhDs, an entire just unbelievable amount of arsenal of stuff there.
Definitely a company to keep on watch. Definitely a company to keep on watch.
I learned a lot with especially the buzzword, the nucleosomes. Very interesting. Very good stuff.
It was a good interview. Long, but good. Gave him a chance to get everything out, I think. All right, guys. It's been a long night. We have what tomorrow night? Stock Spotlight tomorrow night? Is that what we got lined up there at QT?
I believe so.
And then we got an interview Thursday night, correct?
I believe so.
Don't forget to check out the morning show, the STT Radio Morning Show, starring Stock Sumo, Haas, and Pacific Kia, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find us now on Investors Hub under Hot and then Auditorium. Take you right to our show page. Great stuff right there. From all of us here at Stock Traders Talk Radio to all of you out there in Stock Traders Talk Radio listening land. I came up with that tonight, by the way. We wish you all the best in all your trades, and may your portfolio always be green. This is Stock Traders Talk Radio, and we are out.
Thank you for listening to Stock Traders Talk Radio. All views and topics talked about on Stock Traders Talk Radio is solely for entertainment purposes. We are not professional financial advisors and always recommend you seek the advice of a professional financial advisor. Never invest in any stock featured on our show unless you can afford to lose your entire investment. The information contained on our show is based on sources which we believe to be reliable, but is not guaranteed by us as being accurate, and might not be a complete statement or summary of the available data. Stock Traders Talk Radio advises that the investments in companies profiled are commonly considered to be high risk, and use of the information provided is at the investor's sole risk. Thank you for listening to Stock Traders Talk Radio.